Hey everybody, it's Mike. So I want to talk about, is it possible to lessen the stigma attached with borderline personality disorder? And if so, what are the methods that we can use to lessen or eliminate the stigma associated with it? I personally believe that everybody has the right to be loved and to be happy, no matter who you are. I myself have overcome all kinds of horrific things, very difficult challenges, and I've overcome things that would normally have a lot of stigma attached to it. I don't share about that because it has to do with other anonymous 12-step programs, so I don't talk about it publicly. So I understand stigma and I understand wanting to not be judged based on past um, being wrapped up in whatever disorder or dysfunction you have. So before I say anything else, I am not a borderline, so I don't know what it is to have borderline personality disorder on a personal level. I am not a mental health professional, and I'm not a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So please don't take anything I say as a substitute for real counseling from a professional. Any actions you take based on what I say is your responsibility. So I was watching a video because now this channel has gotten past the 1,000 subscriber mark, and so I'm going to put some time and some effort into this channel. And so I want to do my research, and I was flipping through YouTube, and I watched this really great animation about borderline personality disorder. And what I find with these videos that want to explain borderline personality disorder, what is borderline personality disorder, they talk about some really basic things, and understandably, they seem to have the focus of wanting to give understanding and empathy and sympathy towards what the borderline goes through. And so, as always is the case, they state that people with borderline personality disorder are unable to manage opposing feelings. So they can't tolerate having a happy and a sad, or a loving and an angry feeling at the same time. So they have to switch between one, what we call splitting. And at the end of the video, and so it talked about those kinds of things, which if you don't know anything about it and you've never known anybody with borderline personality disorder, you go, oh, that's sad. And they may say something like, borderlines have difficulty maintaining relationships. But that's really quite an understatement. And if you haven't experienced it, you go, oh, that's really sad. But me, being who I am, if I see they have difficulty maintaining relationships, what comes up in me is, oh, but I'm so good at maintaining relationships, I'd be able to make it work. And I chalk that up to somebody not really explaining what that means, their inability to maintain relationships, or difficulty in maintaining relationships. And I know that a lot of both non-borderlines and borderlines get very reactive and defensive towards any kind of video that they see as creating or maintaining the stigma associated with dysfunction that's out of somebody's control. Anyway, at the end of that video, it was a video about a dog, maybe you've seen it, and the dog wants to play with a ball, and the dog, because it has borderline, can't play with the ball and is afraid of the ball. And by the end of the video, the poor dog can only fantasize about the ball, but can never play with it. And so you feel very sad for the dog. And so I went and looked at the comments, and I believe that a lot of them were borderlines who were watching the video. And there was a lot of this video made me cry, and it made me very sad, and I felt so bad for the dog. All the dog wanted to do was play with the ball, but then at the end all it could do was fantasize about playing with the ball. And then somebody who must have been a borderline wrote something to the effect of, it made me cry at the very end, because that one line at the very end, it just said, strangely, really, and really weird, sort of out of place, sort of addendum at the end. It said, borderlines are often very kind. But again, taken out of context, you don't know what that means. I know what that means because I've experienced it. And I can tell you they're kind under these circumstances for this length of time for these reasons. But what I believe a borderline said, yeah, it made me cry when I read that part because it's so hard trying to explain to people how much I care and how much, what a really good person I am. But then there's this stigma attached to BPD, and it's hard to get close to people because of the stigma. So let me get rid of what that means. The stigma has nothing to do with the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. I can speak for everybody. Nobody cares about the diagnosis. Nobody cares about the word. In fact, my ex, who didn't get help, when I started talking about, I think you might have borderline personality disorder, she got very upset and felt like it's a disorder. She thought I was judging her. I wasn't judging her. I had it like it explained it. I felt better. It's like, no, there's an explanation. It's this. So none of us care that you have a disorder called borderline personality disorder. Nobody cares about that. We accept that. We have no problem accepting you for that. The stigma is associated with the very real destruction that is caused to other people as a result of the behavior that the disorder causes you to do. That's it. Now that I've gone through it. I've gone through it twice now, but the second time was, I met somebody and briefly sort of kind of dated, and after the third or fourth date, it became very clear to me this person was a borderline, and I thankfully, just ended all contact, but I didn't have to go through any of the trauma or the pain that I did the first time. So I apparently learned my lessons so far. I forgot what I was saying, but if you're a borderline and you struggle with this and you're angry about the stigma attached to the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, let me just tell you that's not what the stigma is about. The stigma is about, see, and the oven agrees. The stigma is associated with the pain, the horrendous pain that your disorder forces you to inflict on others, that in my experience you are either completely unaware of or mostly unaware of, or you are justifying. There's a comment on here, the person knows who they are, I won't repeat it, but there's somebody here who put a bunch of comments together basically justifying splitting on people, ghosting them. And the complete lack of empathy for the effect of those behaviors on others was very evident in the comments. And that was the worst part of it for me. The worst part of it was, listen, if I know somebody's doing their best and I know somebody has a difficulty and they respond out of their difficulty as we all do, I don't judge people for that. The only thing that I require of everybody in my life is that they have the ability to be aware of what they've done and why they've done it. And if they can voice it and own it and take responsibility for it, which means that they're prepared to change their behavior and they can follow through on that, that's all I care about. This is one thing my ex-wife never got. We fought all the time and I never held on to it. If we were in counseling, because we were in counseling, we'd go to counseling, we'd work through it, we'd talk it over, I'd get my feelings out, blah, 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 and I'd never remember it after that. But she remembered everything. Borderlines don't remember anything. They're not even aware. I mean, this is the experience. Maybe you know differently. From what I read from some borderlines, they know and they see what they've done and they can't stop themselves and they feel horrible about it. But the whole catch-22 of borderline personality disorder, makes it difficult. Maybe they know that they'll split on you and, who knows what. I don't know. I'm not a borderline, so I don't know. But the reason I'm talking to you about this is instead of trying to get rid of the stigma, that's not going to fix the problem. Because even if you get rid of the stigma by helping people to have empathy for what you go through, it will not change the actual damage that occurs to the other person as a result of the behavior you can't control and or are not aware of. And if you're not aware of how damaging it is. That was my experience also with my borderline ex, was that before the final discard happened, I shared with her and she came to me and said, yeah, I'm sorry I did this. And I said, no. And then we talked about it. There was a whole 3 weeks she didn't even remember. And I said, you did this and you said that. And you said, you did these and this really affected me these ways. And she was like, sorry, I don't remember. And then there were times, when things were going on and when we were having difficulties, and I'm like, you just don't really care about the effect of your behavior, or you don't take any responsibility. And she says, of course I do. That would be awful for somebody. And I could tell she was talking, intellectually she knew, but I could tell she didn't really have an emotional understanding or connection of what she had done or why it was so damaging. And to really have an understanding of how damaging the behavior is. So for those of you who are in therapy and want to be in therapy, maybe you're not in therapy yet, but you want to be, the whole point, I suppose the whole point of therapy is for you to heal yourself. In terms of relationships, I can tell you from those on the other end, the way to get rid of the stigma is to honestly be willing to see and understand from the perspective of the non-borderline how incredibly damaging it is. It's not just that you hurt our feelings. It's not just that you annoy us. It's not just that you do things differently. It's not just that you're special and you're super intuitive or you're super reactive or you're super sensitive, which is what I kept hearing and I keep hearing, that this is it. And if you could just, in other words, if we could just know that about you, it would all be okay. It's not okay. It's as if somebody can't, and in some cases I guess this is true, imagine somebody who can't resist the temptation to punch you in the face. They can sit there and say to you, you don't understand. I have this disorder and I'm super sensitive and I overreact and it's not my fault that I punch you in the face. Well, even if I intellectually understand and empathize, it won't change the actual physical damage of broken noses and broken cheekbones and missing teeth that comes from getting punched in the face. No amount of talking about it or justifying it will change the actual damage. And there's a difference between somebody who just simply is sensitive and gets their feelings hurt or somebody who projects onto others. Those are very real things. And, my experience with borderlines is they want to classify it that way. When my borderline ex had done really hurtful things to me and I brought it to her attention, her favorite response was, that sounds like that's your problem. You're projecting that onto me. I think that's your problem. And I'm like, there's a difference between that and, the actual damage that you cause. So being willing to look at the difference between the subtleties between what I just mentioned and what borderline person, the real damage that it causes to other people. If you're willing to take a look at that, and then if you're able to see that to the best of your ability, to try and understand that, and then be motivated to go, you know what, I know I have all of these feelings inside of me, but I want to then focus on the actual physical reality, the damage that's caused, and try to avoid that. And then if you can learn how to modify your behavior so that you can allow yourself to have all of the splits and everything that goes on inside of you and not externalize it onto somebody else, then you won't have to worry about the stigma, because then you can have a partner who can understand, who can love you and accept you with your dysfunction, and because everybody's got something. As long as you are able to, in reality, prevent causing the real damage and destroying the connection, you'll find that there's no shortage of people who will love you exactly for who and what you are. The only thing people care about is whether or not, how you treat them. I had a teacher who once said, the world isn't interested in excuses, only results. In other words, it doesn't matter what you feel in terms of the actual physical world. And relationships are like that. People only care about how you treat them. They don't care what your motives are. If you're close to somebody, you can explain to them your feelings and your motives and have a different action, and they'll love you for that, because true love is that. Love is an action. It's not a feeling. And love is taking the action you don't want to take because you know that action will actually be a kind and loving and healing thing for your partner. So if you can learn to tolerate having all of your negative feelings and your hatred and dislike and boredom and disgust and whatever comes up in your mind, fear, judgment, whatever comes up in your mind, if you can learn to tolerate that and then take action as though you had loving feelings, then you will have mastered it, and nobody will stigmatize you for being a borderline. So you need to understand the difference between, a stigma of, oh, they got this, so here's the stigma, and the actual stigma that comes from somebody who said, wow, man, being with that person is really painful. I don't care what the fuck their problem is. I'm not willing to be hurt like that. You have to learn the difference. All right? So I don't often talk directly to borderlines, but I thought I would. And I think knowledge about the disease and the effects of the disease, I think if we can come together, both codependents and borderlines, and come together, and I think it's possible. It might be really, really challenging, and maybe I'm wrong, but maybe we can help heal each other. Okay? All right, that's it for me. All right, see you guys later. Oh, by the way, the little borderline in the corner, she's very sad because you haven't subscribed yet. So if you want to heal a borderline, you can heal this little crying girl right here. Just mouse over her little face and subscribe, and then you will have healed one borderline forever. All right, talk to you later.